I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that changes the way you see the people closest to you. I woke up on an ordinary morning, believing I was a happily married man, deeply loved by a woman I had spent a decade building a life with. Nothing felt different. But by the time I uncovered the truth that night, everything I thought I knew about my family was gone. And what I found out next, most people can't even bring themselves to say out loud. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. My name is David Vance. For 7 years, I thought I was living the definitive version of the American dream in a quiet, tree-lined suburb of Oak Ridge, Ohio. I was a senior structural engineer, a man who literally built his career on ensuring foundations were solid, unyielding, and capable of withstanding immense pressure. My wife, Julianne, was an interior designer, a woman whose entire life revolved around making spaces feel warm, welcoming, and beautiful. Together, we had a beautiful 6-year-old son named Leo. Our home was the kind of place people envied, a beautifully restored craftsman house with a sprawling backyard where Leo played t-ball. I adored Julianne. I trusted her with my life, my finances, and my vulnerabilities. When you spend years looking at someone through a lens of absolute devotion, your brain automatically filters out the anomalies. You don't see the slight shifts in posture, the sudden changes in passwords, or the way their eyes linger on a screen just a fraction of a second too long before turning it away. You assume that the foundation is solid because you were the one who poured the concrete. But foundations can rot from the inside out, hidden beneath the pristine hardwood floors, completely invisible until the day the structure begins to lean. The subtle fracturing began so gradually that I barely registered it as noise. Julianne's design business, Vivid Spaces, suddenly began securing high-end residential contracts in Columbus, a 2-hour drive from our home. Initially, I was thrilled for her. She had spent years working on local, lower-budget consultations, and this felt like the professional breakthrough she deserved. But with the success came a quiet, persistent withdrawal. The vibrant, talkative woman, who used to recount every detail of her day over dinner, was replaced by someone who seemed perpetually exhausted, her mind always drifting toward an unseen horizon. The weekend trips became standard protocol. High-net-worth clients expect face-to-face updates on Saturdays, David, she would tell me, smoothing down her designer blouse while packing a sleek overnight bag. I never questioned it. Why would I? I was proud of her independence. I stepped into the role of both parents on those weekends, taking Leo to the local diner for pancakes, coaching his Little League games, and keeping the house spotless. I thought I was being a supportive modern husband. In reality, I was unknowingly clearing the runway for my own execution. Looking back, the signs were glaring, flashing like neon warnings in the dark. It was the way her phone remained face down on the kitchen island. It was the scent of an unfamiliar, expensive woodsy cologne that clung to her silk scarf one Sunday evening, a scent she casually brushed off as a sample from a luxury fabric showroom. I believed her because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. The morning after my discovery, I waited until Julianne left for another supposed site inspection in Columbus. The moment her SUV cleared the driveway, the quiet of the house felt heavy, almost suffocating. I went up to our home office, my hands trembling as I opened her old personal laptop, which she rarely used anymore, but kept synced to her primary cloud account. Because I had managed our home network for years, I knew the master recovery protocols. It took me less than 10 minutes to gain access. What I found inside wasn't just a handful of incriminating messages, it was a meticulous, digital archive of a parallel universe. There were folders dating back exactly 3 years. Folders filled with travel itineraries, shared bank account statements under a Shell LLC, and hundreds of high-resolution photos of my wife and Marcus Vance on secluded beaches in Maine, in luxury boutique hotels in Chicago, and in the very house in Columbus that I had unwittingly helped fund. The messages between them were devastatingly casual. They discussed me not with malice, but with a chilling lack of empathy. I was referred to as the provider, a reliable mechanism to keep the Oak Ridge house running while they built their actual future together. They had even mapped out a timeline for when Julianne would eventually file for divorce, waiting until Leo turned 8 so the custody transition would be easier to navigate legally, for Marcus to step in as a stepfather. The cold, calculated nature of the timeline shattered whatever remaining fragments of my heart were left. They hadn't just stolen my present. They were actively planning to colonize my future. Sitting in the dim light of the office, surrounded by the evidence of a 3-year execution plot against my life, a profound, icy clarity washed over me. The initial urge to scream, to confront her the moment she walked through the door, to throw her belongings onto the front lawn in front of the neighbors, it entirely evaporated. Rage is volatile. It burns hot and leaves you vulnerable to making mistakes. I realized that if I confronted her now, she would immediately alert Marcus. With his immense wealth, corporate legal teams, and Julianne's calculated positioning, they would tie me up in litigation, paint me as unstable, and strip me of my custody of Leo. I was a structural engineer. When a building is structurally compromised beyond repair, you don't try to salvage the walls while standing inside it. You plan a controlled demolition from a safe distance. I closed the laptop, wiped down the keys, and placed it exactly as I had found it. I went downstairs, washed my face with freezing water, and looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back looked tired, but the panic was gone. In its place was a stranger with an unyielding sense of purpose. I was going to fight them, but I wasn't going to use their weapons. I was going to use their own arrogance against them. They believed I was oblivious, a predictable creature of habit who would continue to maintain their comfortable baseline while they orchestrated my downfall. I decided right then to let them keep believing that lie for as long as I needed. For the next year, my life became a masterclass in psychological warfare and operational security. To Julianne, I remained the dedicated, slightly weary husband. I celebrated her business milestones, asked polite questions about her Columbus clients, and never once looked at her phone or questioned an overnight trip. But underneath that calm exterior, I was systematically dismantling the life we had shared. I opened a private bank account at a small, independent credit union, 2 towns over, ensuring all statements were strictly electronic and sent to a secure, newly created encrypted email address. Every month, I quietly transferred small, legally defensible amounts of my separate income into that account, labeling them as recreational savings or home maintenance cash withdrawals in small increments that wouldn't trigger an automated audit from our joint accountant. I also began consulting with a high-end, discreet forensic accountant and a top-tier family law attorney in a neighboring county, far outside Marcus Vance's sphere of influence. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Clara Vance, laid it out clearly. In Ohio, asset division and custody are highly dependent on the stability of the home environment and documented financial misconduct. We need a paper trail that proves she was using Marshall funds to subsidize her relationship and her secret business assets with Marcus. I became a ghost in my own home, tracking every dime Julianne spent on her business trips, archiving every receipt, and compiling a bulletproof legal dossier that would leave her with no room to maneuver when the trap finally sprung. Living a double life is an exhausting endeavor. There were moments of profound emotional dissonance that almost broke me. I would sit at the dinner table, watching Julianne cut up Leo's chicken or laugh at a joke he made, and for a fleeting second, the past 7 years would feel real again. The warmth of the room, the familiar smell of the roast dinner, the sound of my son's laughter, it would pull at my soul, tempting me to believe that maybe I could just forget what I saw. Maybe I could fix it. But then, Julianne's phone would buzz on the counter, and I would see that specific, subtle shift in her posture as she checked the screen, and the ice would return to my veins. I realized that the woman I loved hadn't existed for a very long time. The person sitting across from me was a stranger wearing my wife's face, a co-conspirator in a plot to hollow out my life. I channeled all my grief, all my sense of betrayal, into protecting my son. Leo became my solar center. Every weekend Julianne was away, I poured my entire soul into making his childhood magical. We built elaborate fortresses in the living room, explored state parks, and talked about the future. I was building a new foundation for him, a hidden sanctuary that would remain standing when the storm finally hit our family. The final phase of my strategy required a complete professional relocation. I knew that staying in Oak Ridge after the split would be untenable. Marcus's influence in the regional construction sector was vast, and I refused to live in the shadow of their betrayal. I quietly began reaching out to national executive recruiters, looking for positions far away from the Midwest. After 3 months of covert interviews conducted from my car during lunch breaks, I landed an offer as the Chief Technology Officer for a major infrastructure firm in Seattle, Washington. The position came with a substantial salary increase, comprehensive relocation benefits, and a corporate culture that valued long-term stability. Most importantly, it gave me a legitimate, ironclad reason to relocate my life across the country. I accepted the offer with a delayed start date set for 6 months out, allowing me ample time to finalize the legal paperwork in Ohio before making a single public move. I didn't tell a soul, not my colleagues, not my friends, and certainly not Julianne. To the world, David Vance was still just a quiet engineer, working his steady job in Oak Ridge. In reality, my bags were already packed, my destination was set, and the countdown had officially begun. The date of execution was set for a Friday in late August, a weekend when Julianne had scheduled a massive 3-day design conference in Miami with Marcus. I watched her pack her luxury bags that Thursday night, even helping her lift them into the trunk of her car the following morning. She kissed my cheek, a cold, perfunctory gesture that had become her standard, and told me she'd see me Sunday night. "Take good care of Leo," she said with a rehearsed smile. "Always do," I replied, watching her drive down the street until her taillights disappeared around the corner. The moment she was gone, the clock started ticking. My moving crew, which I had hired from a company 2 cities away to ensure complete confidentiality, arrived an hour later. We didn't take everything, only the items that mattered. I took Leo's furniture, his toys, his clothes, and the personal family heirlooms that had belonged to my grandparents. I left all the expensive furniture Julianne had curated for the house, all the high-end decor that symbolized the hollow life we had lived. By Friday afternoon, the Craftsman house on Elm Street was semi-empty, a shell of its former self. I packed the final suitcases into the back of my Toyota Camry, secured Leo into his car seat, and took one last look at the house. I felt no sadness, only a profound, overwhelming sense of liberation. We were driving toward the airport, toward a direct flight to Seattle, leaving the wreckage behind. We landed in Seattle on Friday evening, moving directly into a beautiful, fully furnished corporate apartment overlooking the Puget Sound that I had arranged weeks prior. Leo was thrilled by the city lights and the water, completely oblivious to the tectonic shift that had just occurred in his life. On Saturday morning back in Ohio, my legal team officially filed the divorce petition and the accompanying financial misconduct lawsuit at the county courthouse. A professional process server was dispatched to Julianne's luxury hotel room in Miami, delivering the comprehensive legal packet directly into her hands while she sat poolside with Marcus. The packet contained everything: the 3 years of financial tracking, the explicit proof of her diversion of marital assets, the cross-country employment contract establishing my residency in Washington, and an emergency temporary custody order granted by an Ohio judge based on the documented evidence of her intended relocation plans with a third party. My phone remained off all day. When I finally turned it on Saturday night, it exploded with dozens of missed calls, frantic text messages, and voicemails from Julianne. Her initial messages were filled with rage and confusion, demanding to know what I had done and where our son was. But as the hours progressed, the tone of her messages shifted from fury to sheer terror. She had realized that the quiet, predictable husband she thought she could manipulate had completely outmaneuvered her. The legal battle that followed was intense, but because of the meticulous foundation I had spent a year building, Julianne and Marcus had no viable counter-strategy. The evidence of financial misconduct was undeniable, and the court upheld my primary custody of Leo, granting Julianne restricted visitation rights that required her to travel to Washington at her own expense. She lost her claim to my future earnings and was forced to settle the division of our Oak Ridge property heavily in my favor to avoid a highly publicized, damaging civil trial that would have ruined Marcus's corporate reputation. Today, Leo and I live in a quiet, beautiful home nestled in the hills of the Pacific Northwest. The air here is clean, the mountains are resolute, and our new foundation is built on absolute honesty and fierce, protective love. Looking back, the pain of that initial betrayal on that ordinary morning almost destroyed me. But I learned that sometimes, the only way to save the structure of your life is to let the broken pieces go and build something entirely new from scratch. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for staying with me through this incredibly personal journey. If David's story of resilience, strategy, and finding the strength to rebuild resonated with you, please show your support. Take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below with your overall thoughts on how the situation was handled, and subscribe to our channel, Family Secrets and Revenge, so you never miss another cinematic chronicle of truth, justice, and the hidden realities of human nature. Your support means the world to us, and it helps ensure these stories continue to find their way to those who need them most. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay strong, and protect the foundations that matter most.